Welcome to this special LPO online talk. I'm Ed Gardner. I've done a few of these chats to camera and just with me and my iPad, and I was bored of talking to myself basically. And I'm hugely privileged to welcome three of my wonderful LPO colleagues, Sue Böhling, Andy Barclay and Johnny Ryan. Hi guys.
Hi.
Hi, Ed.
Hi.
Now, guys, what have you been doing? Johnny, how have you been keeping in touch with all your section?
We've got a WhatsApp group that people have been contributing for, that normally we use for touring, or normally we use for where's the rehearsal today, or what time are we starting tomorrow, that sort of thing. Or sometimes what are we playing tomorrow, or what are we playing later. Those sorts of things that make it very that just sort of grease the wheels of general sort of orchestral scheduling. And so that's already been set up for probably about a year or two. And so it's just continued as usual, but without all the logistical questions.
Yeah, right. And Sue, have you done any playing with your colleagues in this strange isolated time?
Not got together with our colleagues, but I had a bit of a spontaneous evening here. My husband and I were very lucky to live in a very pretty garden square, and I think they wanted a bit of a sing-along, and at no notice we had to put a little show together. But we've got our windows at the front of the house, and we opened them up and made a little stage. The weather's been fantastic, and we just sang Blue out through our French windows, and we did the usual Lambeth Walk and Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and I sent everybody weeping to send in the clowns. So that was
weeping in a good way, in an emotional way, of course.
Well, it made me cry. I think that was just due to the lack of practice, but you know. Yeah, it was a great evening. She's really lovely. We've got quite an amazing new network here. We're getting about 150 texts a day. It's almost got too much. But all the neighbours are now in touch and everybody knows each other. It's quite something. Good.
That's really fantastic. Listen, we've been sent a load of questions from people connected to the LPO, from friends, from junior artists. And I'm gonna take some myself, the easy ones, and fire a few of the more difficult ones at you. So let's just kick off. Andy, why don't I go for you? If you could sit down and do this, what we're doing right now, with a conversation with four people, with any four people of your choice, historical or alive, present company excluded, of course, who would they be?
I hadn't done any preparation on that. I never thought about that before, but it's just come to me that the other day they streamed this LPO film called Battle for Music, which is a black and white film made with members of the LPO acting in it, about how the LPO survived the problems that were thrown up by the Second World War, and you know, Beecham went off to America and the orchestra nearly collapsed and it was taken over by the players. It's a brilliant film. It's got some awful acting in it. But I would just love to have my colleagues and the percussion section from the 1940s. I just think it would be hysterical to find out how alike we are. And I would just love to do that. And just to see what's changed and how they felt about everything. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. When I was thinking about that question overnight, I was reminded of something someone said to me about composers. We all want, when we do a piece of Berlioz or when we do a piece of, let's say, Lutoslawski, which we should have been doing today, for all your life, you want the composer to be in the room because you have these amazing questions that you want him to enlighten us about. But when we do a new piece of music, we're so glad when the composer stays away from what we're doing, not fiddles. That wasn't my quote, but there's some truth in it. Right, let's get another one of these questions. What is the funniest moment of your musical career? I'll kick off with this one. Being a conductor, the jokes are normally at my expense. So it's very rare that I laugh myself on stage. But the most embarrassing moment, I think I can say, there have been a few, but for me, the most embarrassing one was turning out to the Albert Hall a little bit late for a prom because of terrible traffic along the Edgware Road. And I was there just on time, about 7:28, and I got my scores out, all fine, dressed fine. Everyone was out on stage, including all the stage management. And I looked in my bag, pulled my shoes out, and I had 2 left shoes of the same. I have 2 identical pairs of black shoes. And I had to go on stage with 2 left shoes, trying to make it look like my right foot was turned around a little bit. And it was a very difficult piece of new music that we started with. And bit by bit, the orchestra just started nudging and laughing. And that's all anyone can remember of that concert. So Johnny, over to you, your funniest moment.
I don't know, there's lots of funny moments, but similar to your getting dressed sort of story, I once turned up to a day's work with no instrument or clothes. I mean, I was wearing clothes, but they weren't the right clothes. And I ended up that evening playing somebody else's instrument and wearing everybody else's leftover bits of clothes, which included the librarian's trousers. And the librarian, I think at the time I was probably a 29 or 30-inch waist, and he was a 54-inch waist, and I was wearing his trousers, which I had to sort of fold around, so it looked like half a sarong down to about the knees.
Wow.
Before it sort of so that was quite something. Another time was often in performances, because they're quite serious, or you're concentrated and focused, that the things that go wrong are often extremely funny if they're wrong enough. So we were doing a Beethoven piece, and Vladimir was conducting with what's it called, a Jingly Johnny or something?
Jingling Johnny, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a piece of French, it was Rameau or Lully or something.
It was Rameau, that's right.
Yeah.
And it was the very first piece in that set. And as he was banging it on the thing, the jingly bit at the top just fell off and ran, so it was like suddenly became completely redundant for the rest of the piece. And that was very hard to keep a straight face over. But
I can imagine that.
Yeah, but there's so many like little bits, little things. Often when you get caught out by mistake, probably talking to somebody about something else, and you haven't realized that the whole orchestra's waiting for you, and you're just having a chat, waiting for you to answer the question which you haven't listened to.
But, a lot, Johnny. Yeah. Naughty horns.
Yeah.
Yeah, naughty horns, quite right. All right, these questions are quite brutal. Okay, we've had the funniest moment. Or who dares answer this? Have you ever had a complete blank on stage, either playing or conducting, and what did you do? Andy, over to you. Anything?
Yeah, I remember this one time. Again, it was with Vladimir. Obviously, we've seen a lot of him over the last few years, so a lot of these things have been with Vladimir. But we were doing a piece that you all know well called "The Prince of the Pagodas" by Benjamin Britten, and it's got quite a famous xylophone part in that everybody knows, and my students have to learn. In one of the movies, I think it's called "The Four Kings" or something. But aside from that, I didn't really know the piece. And I also noticed there was this bit with 2 tom-toms in it, which kind of went quite. And in all the rehearsals, I just kind of read it because you can just follow the lines, and it was fine. And that particular day, I remember it had been a very stressful day at Festival Hall. Sometimes those days when you got a morning rehearsal and an evening concert. In the afternoon, there was some project with a feature first. There was also they did all the photographs that day. So I was running upstairs carrying cymbals and snowdrum and tails to have my photograph taken. By the time I got to the evening, I was a bit spaced out. And the xylophone part was fine. But I got to the tom-toms and I started playing and realised after about a bar that I actually didn't know where I was. And it's just me, I think. And Vladimir was kind of looking at me, and he kind of clocked that I didn't know where I was. But yeah, I just tried to I just sort of looked at him with an expression like, screwed it up. So what should we do? And he kind of just went like that.
Very good. Yes.
And, yeah, that's one of the worst things I've done in recent memory, I think.
Yeah. So when those things happen, I mean, as a conductor, you're lucky in that you're not making any noise, at least voluntarily, so you can kind of get away with it with a great orchestra like you guys. But it shows how exposed the whole process is, doesn't it? The slightest thing. Or
I think the other thing is that people often ask me, does anything ever go wrong? And of course, from the audience's point of view, probably most of the time they can't hear anything going wrong. But the thing about
Exactly.
musicians is
Yeah.
that when something is about to go wrong, we hear it within a few milliseconds before the audio, and also I think we tend to know exactly most of the time what to do. So it's kind of cauterized. Is that what you do? You know, it's
Mm.
destroyed before it becomes a problem. So, you know, in any concert, even just a little bit like two lines of music that slightly come apart, everyone's alarm bells start ringing and everybody sort of focuses in and it gets back again and it goes on and nobody else knows it.
It's true, and often I find if you get a moment like that, as you say, a millisecond like that at the beginning of a performance, the performance after it can be completely galvanized into something greater because everyone suddenly switches onto another gear, and yeah, that can be a wonderful thing. Often,
if only we could be in that gear all the time, Ed.
we are, of course we are.
Yeah. We are, Andy, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
All the time.
Now I got some more positive, maybe more positive questions. And actually, there's something on opera, and that thing that you're talking about, Andy, that comes up a lot in opera, doesn't it? Because you're reacting, as some people say, you have half an ear on the stage, half an ear in the pit, one eye on the conductor, one eye on your colleagues, and an opera makes an orchestra far more flexible in a way, and the LPO has that unique position of being an opera orchestra for half the year and on the platform for the symphony orchestra for the other half. And I think that gives it an incredible flexibility. Sue, can I put that one to you? What do you think the biggest differences are between playing opera and concert repertoire?
It's a big difference for us. And it all comes down to sound and projection. If you're let loose with a huge solo on a concert hall, the acoustic's going to take you off. It's going to fly to the people at the back of the audience. Obviously, the main opera house that we're working in is lovely Glyndebourne, and for the audience, the acoustic is phenomenal. When I've been lucky enough to sit out the front and hear, it's just phenomenal, but it doesn't feel so good for us in the pit. And so compared to the concert hall where your sound just flies, in the pit, it kind of just falls right in front of your feet, dead. And it's quite hard to know how to gauge how far to push it, and inevitably we're told to keep down a lot more. I think the hardest thing for me, we're quite low in the pit, and I would love to be able to have more contact with the singers. We're a bit cut off, and so sometimes you can feel a bit lonely when actually you've got a big duet going on, but it's quite hard to hear. So it's for me, it's a sound thing, just how far you can, add to go, and it's just you want to hear your sound going somewhere, and in any pit, generally, unless it's a very, very open one, your sound is falling a bit flat, which is a bit depressing,
I always think that about Winds, actually, because so much of the great operatic repertoire is written for duets between you and the stage. Or if you think of that, Johnny, you think of that great trio in Fidelio between the horns and the singer on stage. But you guys are the ones right at the back of most of those pits. And as you say, Glyndebourne's really, really closed off. But I think there is something special about an orchestra who spend a lot of time accompanying singers, actually. And that flexibility and way of being with the singers is a pretty special skill. Johnny, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say that's exactly right. When you're in the pit, you can't really play out because you do want to have contact with the singers, so you're listening for them. So you don't play as loud as you normally would when you're on your own or filling a symphony hall. Often most conductors ask you to play much quieter than you forget how you have to play. But it's the fact that you start listening to somebody else outside the orchestra more that creates a much more homogeneous sound from the orchestra itself as a whole, I think.
I was going to say, I think people forget being members of big orchestra, especially like the program we will be playing tonight. It's huge orchestral forces, but at the end of the day, we're still chamber musicians. Even when the pieces are really loud and you've got a massive orchestra, we're still, ears are tuning in to all sorts of people around us. It's still chamber music. It's an amazing thing, really. But I love the flexibility of having the pit and the concert hall as well.
I think it informs our symphonic repertoire too, though, as the sound of the orchestra. When we play on stage, that we sound. I would like to think, well, it's not one way or the other what I like to think, but I think having heard quite a lot of orchestras, we sound quite organic as a whole. The only real thing, I suppose, is in the festival hall, it's so big. We played a lot. We played up quite a lot just to be heard. That suddenly the difference with then going into Glyndebourne is quite noticeable. But also when we go on tour, some of the halls are smaller and the stage is more compact. The sound is projected a whole lot better. And suddenly it becomes quite clear how everybody has been playing together in the festival hall, which is quite expansively.
We have to adapt really quick.
There's a lot of adaptation. Yeah. But I still think that the core of the orchestra sound is a very organic one, and a very, you know, certainly in the brass, I think that's true.
I agree with that.
I think there's this thing that for 3 months or 4 months of the year, we're not the main attraction. I've always thought that gives us we've kind of does our ego a good, you know, gets them back in the bottle a little bit. And because when you're at Glyndebourne, everyone sits down, and when the curtain goes up, they look up and they're looking at the stage, and we're kind of almost like workers, but it's a good thing to feel. And then when we come back on the stage in September, it feels, you know, good to be back out again. Was
it not an amazingly different experience doing Siegfried on stage? Because, you know, we were playing loud, really loud, and Vladimir was asking us to play loud. Yeah. And that was a new experience.
But it's funny that, isn't it? And actually, just picking up on something Johnny said as well, it's so true that in the festival hall, I think for that room to have impact in the audience's bodies, you have to deliver a big, you know, the gestures have to be primary coloured, let's say. So, you know, the soft playing has to be exquisite, and the loud playing has to be really full, and everything needs to be really focused, actually. And Glyndebourne is so live as a pit, isn't it, that the sound just travels out. If you brush anything, it goes out. So for the orchestra to play in such different acoustics, I'm sure that gives it an incredible flexibility. And as you say, when you go on tour, you do these German tours of the great concerts around Germany, you're able to adapt straight away to where you're playing. So where would you say, just pick up on that, where would you say, Sue, your favourite hall is to play?
Well, it might be a surprising one. I got a real shock. It's a hall in Murcia in Spain. Have you ever played there? It was new. It got built really quickly. It's most beautiful natural wood. And we did, I think, probably only maybe 1 or 2 concerts there, but it was fabulous. And another one in the Toyota City in Japan. That's like going up into a block of flats and you think, where are we going? Somebody's kitchen, you know, and then these 2 doors open and you're in this huge concert hall, and you just wouldn't know it was there. That was spectacular.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, let's have another question. What do we have? From an LPO junior artist, we have you ever had to perform at short notice without having an opportunity for a full rehearsal of the program? I can't think of a time I've had that. I've stepped in at the last minute, but never without rehearsals. Any takers?
Maybe the question means without having like two days rehearsal like you would normally do. Is that like a full rehearsal program, or is it just any rehearsal whatsoever?
It's not clear. Any answer you like to it, basically.
Well, I remember sitting on a sofa when it was my birthday. Yeah, day before my birthday. And I got a call to go and do, I can't remember, it might have been, I think it was Don Giovanni. It was a group of musicians and they were playing in the Concertgebouw. And I flew out that night. Somebody had fallen down the stairs and broken their teeth. And I flew out that night and basically got helped through the show the next day, which was at like 12 in the afternoon. And got basically talked through the show by the second horn for the whole thing. And it was a big party afterwards.
Yeah, that must be exhilarating. Your adrenaline must have been going through the roof.
It was just that level, it's just that concentration it's fun. It's great.
Yeah.
I did something, I think you were conducting it. It was at the E&O and it was Benvenuto Cellini. Is that the right one? And
that's right. Yeah.
He was ill on the Timps, and I went in and played third Timps. And I also did the same a few months later. I went and did Britain Midsummer Night's Dream at like 20 minutes notice. But that was easier because I know the Britain. That was fine. But you do get this, you sit down with somebody and say, right, don't worry about that bit, but this bit, listen for the da-da-da-da. And of course, in a pitch, even though it's more scary in a way because of with singers, I mean, even if it's a piece, the singers, it moves around a lot. But of course, it's easier to be passed messages in a pit. Somebody can come up and say, watch out, whatever, which you can't necessarily do in a concert hall. So, but most of the time, I think an orchestra, like if we had to suddenly stand up on stage and do a standard program, I think pretty much we could probably play that without, I mean, it wouldn't be as good as if we'd had a chance to rehearse, but it's, people always get a shock when they hear us play through something, and it all happens fine.
Right. Yeah.
I think sometimes we may not always get as much rehearsal as people would like, but generally in our orchestra and the London orchestras, but you sit down at the first bar of the first rehearsal and people are really on it already.
Absolutely.
It's not like, so.
You also get concerts where you sit down and you're about to play something and you go, what was this again? Yeah, what, this is the where? But yeah, I mean, I like that bit. I like when things are not so well prepared that there's no room to get better. Because I like having that concentration in the, you've got the rest of your life and different things going on at the same time as your rehearsal period, but the concert is the concert. So I think there's a huge difference between, for example, if like a student comes and sits into and listens to the rehearsal and then was to do the same thing actually on stage in the concert, they would be shocked at the huge leap, even between the last rehearsal and the concert, the huge leap that is made at that point where everybody switches on at the same time. Whereas in a rehearsal situation, you've got varying lives going on, etc., etc. People are in and out of concentration maybe, and then you've got on the concert that doesn't happen. So there's an electricity in a concert that doesn't exist, that you cannot replicate in a rehearsal.
That's really leading on from that, Johnny. That's something I think about. I think one of the hardest things I find in my job is how to know the tipping point of when an orchestra feels well enough prepared but not overcooked in that final rehearsal, especially in London where everyone's traveling like crazy and they've got a million things to do, and there's a level of tiredness, of fatigue all the time just because of how the profession works. And do you know what, from nationality to nationality, orchestras are very different, and there are some orchestras who want every single note played through on the general on the morning of a concert, and there's some who hardly want to touch the music because they're fit in a different way, and it's very hard to gauge what an orchestra really wants in that capacity. Yeah,
I can imagine. I think, and it's also only my own personal opinion as well. It's not true of a collective.
No, you're right. Yeah, there are very many different opinions on that. Great. Let me do another official question. So, what do we have? What would you do differently if graduating now and commencing your freelance musical career? And that one's also from a LPO junior artist. Andy, over to you.
Well, I think these days you have to have a wider range of skills. I mean, doing education work and outreach work and all that. The thing I wish I'd done more of is kind of music tech, because now in this period where people keep phoning up and saying, "Oh, can you do this for us? Can you record a bit of drums on the viola?" Thing, whatever I did. And I feel like a complete beginner in trying to sort of suspend the phone with bits of string, and I just wish I was much more au fait with all that. And of course, kids today, we all teach at music colleges. I mean, they're kind of all over it, like my own children are. They sort of my children sort of take remote controls off me now. Just hit that age. And so I do that, and also I would personally I would do a bit more kind of rock and pop. There you go. That's what I wish I'd done more of when I was younger.
Oh, look at you.
I think I would have preferred to have made much more of an effort to go to more gigs, more live gigs, whether that was classical or jazz or rock or something. I've only really started going to gigs in my late 30s. And I don't think I'd ever gone to a gig I've gone to concerts, classical concerts, but I think I would have, similar to what Andy was saying, broadened my horizons, but musically, listened to a lot more jazz, tried to sit down and listen to more just generally other stuff, rather than being so specialized and so focused on really and truly only on what I was doing or what I was preparing. The pieces of music I knew were the pieces of music I'd played or had to study. I spent a lot of time practicing, but not a lot of time exploring the outer world and music in more general terms. And I think these days, you know, I remember going to the library, you'd find a score, you'd find a CD, and you'd sit down and you'd spend an hour or two listening to those bits or those excerpts or the whole piece in general. And you'd follow it in the score, and then you'd go away again. You'd leave those resources behind you. And now you have Spotify, you have IMSLP, you've got everything. It's almost too easy to do that. And I think this doesn't quite answer the question, but that it's almost like when you go somewhere and you've got so much choice, where do you start? Whereas when you're going in, like I think when I was studying, it was very specific, it was very focused. I had that time to do that. Whereas now you can do it anytime. It's almost harder to sit down and focus and to do it. You know, because you say, oh, I listen to it on the train or I listen to it on the bus. And of course you don't, because you end up, I don't know, booking flights or going on Amazon or something, you know, whatever. So things are very, very busy now. And I think that there is gradually seeping in a multitasking element to being a musician, but also to life in general, that is slightly taking away from the focus that you need to have to develop a particular skill in one musical instrument. I've gone off on a tangent there, but you know.
No, that's wonderful. But are you saying it's detrimental to being focused, or are you saying generally that kind of...
I don't know. I think it just depends on your mindset. If you are somebody that is disciplined enough to be able to put stuff away, then I think that's cool. It was like, I remember I read a book and it said, would Michelangelo have painted the Sistine Chapel if he had an iPhone? And it's like I don't know. Or would he have made something even more genius, you know, because he had access to something that was extraordinary? Or does it take away? I don't know if it adds or takes away. It's a little thing of mine, actually. But
fascinating.
But, you know, when you have a work of art, if somebody sits down and writes a symphony, you know, they used to take weeks or months, or they would write a novel. It would take years and years. It still does, because there's very little that can write a novel for you. But I don't know how technology, I mean, it's so interesting, this period, like you said, Andy, to be using technology a lot more. And even when, like, I can imagine when you did your first lesson online on Zoom, that has developed even over 3 or 4 or 5 weeks into something that's probably a lot more usable now. So we're all getting better. We're all getting better at it, but it's still.
Are you, Sue? Do you teach on Zoom?
I've been teaching a little bit, yeah. To be quite honest, I left some of my students. I teach at the Royal Academy, and I left them in peace for a bit because they were all so wired and worked up about exams and finals, and because I teach cor anglais, it's not their main instrument. Oboe is their focus, and they try and fit the core in when they can, although I keep trying to stress how important it is. Now they've got no excuse. They've had all this time, so I'm expecting great things, and I'll be teaching this week online. But I mean, I'll just sort of go back to what you said. The original question was, would you do anything differently? And in all honesty, I don't think I would, because I did the best of what I could at the time with what was there. And my only regret is actually now is we're so crazy busy. None of us could have even been prepared for this with a week's notice, maybe, you know, about getting techie and how will this work and how will we progress. And just to see some of the things that are out there now, what people are doing and collaborating and getting together. And I can see they've got all this tech behind them and amazing microphones. And, you know, I'm just here with my little laptop and, you know, that's all I got at the moment. But we'll be back to normal maybe before just as we're getting used to it all again. I don't know. See how it all goes.
Yeah, the thing, I mean, just to pick up something which Johnny said chimed with me a bit, that this access to music and how we were trained to be very focused on what we were doing and not thinking laterally. I mean, when I talk to students, I talk a lot about read more, go and see some plays, don't just listen to music. I mean, whether you know, you're going to a variety of gigs, I mean, really try and expand your vision way beyond what you do, because all that sort of stuff informs what you do. And these 6 weeks where I haven't been able to, you know, be with you guys, stand in front of orchestras, I found my mind is as free as it's ever been, because, you know, we're all at a stage now where you don't have that sort of cocooned, institutionalized studentship. And I've loved that time for thinking and spreading my wings wider musically with repertoire, with books, with films. It's really, that's been a privilege of this very strange time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Taking some quiet time. I think, you know, like I say, my students were so wired, and now I just want to say, okay, you've had the time, just take, you know, make yourself have a little bit of downtime in the day. Just, you have to stop. And I think that's what Johnny's saying. There is so much, and I've loved it, and I've loved the quiet, and I've loved being able to read, and I've been doing all sorts of weird things and expanding my mind for sure. But I think it's really important that people hang on to some quiet time in their day. But maybe life's going to be like that from now on anyway. I mean, maybe life will never get back to how it was.
It's true. Should we do one last question before we... This is kind of connected to what we were just talking about, but if you could go back to the start of your musical career and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? I mean, Johnny, you've kind of covered it for you, I think. Maybe Andy, have a go at that?
I would probably practice slightly differently. I'd focus on more getting simple things really good. I learned that a bit later on. You know, I think as percussionists, you're sort of flying around lots of different instruments. It's like spinning plates sometimes. You know, you just get your xylophone playing up to scratch, and the snare drum falls apart or whatever. So, and I was sort of running around trying to kind of do everything. And there's a few kind of simple things that now I'm a bit longer in the tooth now, that I know there's certain things that they've got to work all the time, and the rest of the stuff will come to you like that. So I just focus slightly differently on a different sort of thing to practice. If you were to say, can you be more specific? I'd probably say no. At the moment, it's just a concept, you know. I've realised that most things are there's certain things that come. I mean, I'm sure it's true on any instrument. There's certain things that you have to just be able to churn out all the time, technically, and some of the more florid stuff only comes out in now and again. So something like that.
Yeah, good answer. Yeah, I think my one would be I spent a lot of the beginning of my career as an apprentice to you know, seriously established and wonderful conductors, and the thing that fascinated me, and I didn't have enough of a chance to watch it because I was often working with established conductors with their orchestras, is that first hour when you guys, an amazing orchestra, meets a conductor for the first time, and how you relate to each other, and how the relationship either develops or doesn't in that hour, and how that frames the rest of the week. I think there's something mercurial and strange about that I'm really fascinated by. And now I can't really sit in the back of the hall for those sort of rehearsals, but it's fascinating. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this insight into the concert and what the orchestral life of the LPO is. You can listen to the concert we would have performed this evening using the links below, and keep in touch with us on social media using the hashtag LP Online.